So, Adam, if I were to ask you what episode number this was, what would you say? Boom. Boom is the episode.
Oh, Boom. Okay, not the podcast episode. What episode of Boom?
Yes, yes. What episode
Uh
of Doctor Who? The episode Boom. We're going to review Boom right now. That's what we're recording for. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the way that things are being numbered.
4. This is episode 4,
Episode four. Okay. So, what was
right?
episode one?
Episode 1 was the church.
Okay. So you're counting the Church on Ruby Road is the special, Christmas special. But the way that Disney Plus is listing it, when you go to the season, they actually have, I think I'm right about this. When you go to the Doctor Who section, they have this listed as a
Uh,
separate special. The specials one through four, I think. So it's the fourth special, and it's listed separately. But if you go to the season of Doctor Who, it's listed as the first episode. So that makes Boom episode four,
okay.
according to Disney Plus. Now, if you look at the official numbers, I mean, even if you go to the wiki, it's saying it's episode three. So
Really? And then overall it's like episode 307. Is
yeah,
that accurate?
well, it's story 307. Yeah, out
That's
of out of Doctor Who, because sometimes multiple episodes make up one story.
okay.
So
Yeah,
like
yeah,
the
yeah.
classic series, they could have like I think there was one that was like 12 episodes that was all one story or something.
Why does this feel like we're trying to determine what number Doctor David Tennant is?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
is he
It's
he's
all
10.
the
He's
math
11.
the math of Doctor Who, where I will say though, because I think we've had this conversation when we've recorded in the past, probably, 20 episodes ago. But where I made it kind of a big deal about the numbering of the doctors. Like I kind of
Yes.
didn't like they start to mess with it or like, okay, let's not whatever. Now I'm realizing that I have rarely referred to Ncuti Gatwa as the 15th Doctor or
Oh yeah.
15. Like I used to always say 12th Doctor or 12 or 11 or 10. That's how I would call them.
Yeah.
10, was Tennant's name for a long time. I'd say 10th Doctor or 10. Rarely would I even call him Tennant. I feel like
Right.
now, maybe just because there's too many now, too many numbers, too many doctors, and you also now have the War Doctor and the Fugitive Doctor, you have these other things thrown in. It's starting to get a little too confusing where I was catching myself even at the 13th Doctor, where I would sometimes say 12 instead of 13, or I think I called Capaldi 13 for a couple times and he's only 12. So I think I finally got to the point where I was like, you know what, I'm just going to start using the actor's name more.
Yeah.
So no, this is no disrespect to Ncuti Gatwa, where I'm like, oh, I don't see him as a doctor, so I'm only using his name and not a number. So hopefully people aren't reading into that. It's just a matter of like I've kind of lost count,
Yeah. I
to
mean
remember to
this is
call.
a really interesting discussion for us to have because I'm trying to think through the promotional material. Because again, we're so used to even in promotional material, them referring to the doctor by number. I
Mhm.
don't know if they are referring to this doctor by the number. They call him either Shutigatwa or they call him the doctor.
The doctor.
I don't ever really see the 15th doctor. It is just he is the doctor.
It does.
That's a good call out by you. That's
It does
very
start to
interesting.
get to a point where it will start to sound ridiculous, like, oh, the
Oh yeah.
31st Doctor, or 50,
Yeah.
however long they go with this thing. I know this is kind of a bit of a reboot in some ways, but a
Yeah.
continuation. Like it's definitely not a full-on reboot. If it
Right.
was, he'd be the first Doctor. It would be completely different. There's tie-ins, even just in this episode, tons of references back to older content.
Yeah.
So this is a continuation. He's the 15th Doctor. We're not questioning that. But it is kind of interesting that, kind of their way of maybe this is their way of kind of making it a little bit more of a unofficial reboot for the new viewers, so you're not confused as much. If you're kind of referring constantly to the fact that he's the 15th Doctor, and then suddenly new viewers might be like, oh wow, I have how many seasons do I have to go back and
Right.
watch to catch up?
Yeah.
If there's
Yeah.
15 of these people running around. So, and also 14 is still running around too, which is something I completely kind
That's
of forgot about until I was like, wait, isn't David Tennant still out there? Oh yeah, we still have a 14th and 15th Doctor, both alive and kicking. My son was kind of asking me about that. I had mentioned in our last episode that he doesn't really watch Doctor Who, but he kind of asked me about Doctor Who. And he's like, well, what happens if the 14th Doctor dies? Does he regenerate? And then what number Doctor is that one?
I
Because
think that's the question we're all asking, right? Like, what?
yeah, because David Tennant is still out there. He's split, but I think he's equally the Doctor still, right? As
Yeah,
Ncuti Gatwa.
yeah.
It's not like the Ncuti Gatwa is now the official Doctor. I mean, from a marketing perspective, he absolutely is the official Doctor, but from a technical perspective, he's half the Doctor. The other half is still David Tennant. So, yeah, if David Tennant regenerates, now we have two separate regeneration branches, and like, yeah, it's a whole, I mean, there it could really
It's
be very confusing, which I go back to my point why I don't number them anymore. I just,
I mean, even the transcript I'm looking at right now refers to Shutikatwa's doctor as the 15th or in parentheses or the 17th. That's
uh,
there's even some, I mean, it goes back again to Tennant, like the question of which number was Tennant originally, because depending on which number he was, that kind of skews everything else moving forward from there. Um,
yeah, because then you throw in the War Doctor, which adds a number, and then what's
yep.
the other one? Just when Tennant chose to become himself again right away.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. Um,
That's
that one I never got, like trying to act like that was a regeneration. That one I never really understood, but yeah, so the numbers are already messed up anyways. And I did used to like the fact that they were numbered. Now it does start to feel like it's getting a bit ridiculous, and we can just be like, okay, it's the Doctor, and we're,
I,
we're good.
there's we go back to the discussion that we had in the last episode, right? About costume, right? There are these things that we used to consider fundamental aspects of Doctor Who. The Doctor had a costume. And now we're getting into the season and it's like we still like these things. We still like the numbering. We still like the costume. We still like various aspects of it. But I also don't feel like they're necessarily a hill to die on anymore. It's not something for us to make a stink about where it's like, oh, why did this change? Where did this happen? Are we maturing? Is this what it feels like to be a mature fan?
We're just accepting. We're
We're just accepting.
it's like okay, whatever. Like we've been through enough. Uh, but no, I learned that a long time ago, even in my Star Wars fandom, that if you get upset about everything, you're gonna hate the
Yeah.
thing you love. So it's like, no,
Yep.
okay, do they make decisions that I don't like? Absolutely. Does that mean I'm gonna stop enjoying the story? No, because I want to continue to be a fan.
Yep.
And the only way to do that is to roll with it. You got to just roll with it.
Yep.
That's kind of, now there's probably a breaking point for me. If suddenly if the TARDIS one day they're like, you know what, now we're going to change the TARDIS to be a Corvette, and that will be the new vehicle for the new Doctor, and every new Doctor gets a new version. So then maybe it changes from a Corvette to a stagecoach, or something. And like if they start, there is definitely a limit where if there are some of those fundamental things we talked about. What are the fundamental ingredients that make Doctor Who?
Yeah.
I feel like the TARDIS in
Yeah.
its form, as
Yep.
far as it being a police box, a blue police box, at minimum, is at least one of those fundamental things. If there is one, that's the one. Beyond that,
What what if the doctor goes back to the babies and Eric becomes the new companion moving forward? Would that be a clean break at that point?
no, that actually wouldn't
Oh,
be as much as I wouldn't like it. Like there's been weirder companions. I mean,
that is
we've had
unexpected.
robot dog, we've had
Yeah.
handles. There's been some
Yeah.
strange companions. So a talking baby with the mind of a 6-year old, probably not the strangest companion he's ever had.
Okay, we've gone totally off the
I
rails at
know
this
we've
point.
definitely started this episode with a rabbit trail that we did not plan for, but
And just a heads up, I think it's because both of us are operating on very little sleep after trying to catch back up after falling behind on the new season. So,
yes,
hey, we're making it through. We'll do
yes,
this.
yes. So we are going to review Boom, which we were talking about Stephen Moffat coming back. This is
Yes.
the first episode that he'll be one of the writers for. I saw some of the behind the scenes stuff and they were kind of, I know he's listed as the writer, but he says himself that he kind of co-wrote it, I guess,
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
Dave.
Yeah.
So but he is being credited as the writer for this one. 15th Doctor. Ruby is the companion. The main enemy is saying here Villain Guard Ambulance is the main enemy.
That's
It's
that's
debatable
interesting.
if that's the main enemy or is it just Villain Guard. Location Castarian 3 in the
Yep.
5th of October, the year 5087. There you go. It's story number, like you said, 307. So yeah, that's the details. This one starts out with a couple soldiers wandering through a battlefield. One of them looks severely injured, looks blind, some bandages over the eye. The other one is kind of guiding them. We don't know a lot about them at this point, just that they're communicating back to some sort of base.
Yep.
And at this base is the one's daughter.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's kind of how the intro starts out with that. Then they're a little nervous about these what they're calling ambulances, and then one of them falls into a pit, steps on a landmine, and gets disintegrated. Kind of blow. It's kind of a
Yeah.
weird way of dying on a landmine because it's not like this huge explosion. It's almost like this combustion, but it's like relatively contained.
Yeah. I mean, it's the individual, right? We find out later in the episode, the individual ends up being the explosive, not the mine
Right.
itself. It interacts with your being and causes the explosion. It is the way that this episode starts. It feels different. I think just the fact that we have soldiers wandering through a battlefield, one clearly wounded, one very clearly concerned about the enemy still being out there, and then you have the ambulances, and you have a lot of discussion, and then they add to it the one injured soldier's daughter. It feels like this one from the very get go is it's carrying a little bit more emotional weight to it than kind of some of the other episodes that we had. Even the Maestro, as unhinged as Maestro was, it still came off a little bit lighter than this one. I don't know if
Yeah.
it's just because you wander into a war scene, it's always going to carry a heavier weight to it.
Yeah, if we're including the Christmas special in the list of episodes so far with this
Yeah.
doctor, which I think you should, like that kind of, we are kind of joking about it, but it really is kind of the first episode of this season in a lot of ways. Like if you didn't see that episode and you just started with Space Babies, you'd be kind of lost.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so in a lot of ways that is, but yeah, if you go back to that episode with the goblins and then you have Space Babies and you have, Maestro and some of the silliness there, every episode up to this point, up to Boom, has had kind of quirky, silly stuff in it. This is the
Right.
first
Yep.
episode that didn't really have any
Yeah.
comic. I mean,
That's
I'm trying to think now because usually Doctor Who has at least some comic relief. I mean, of course, some of the dialogue is a little lighthearted,
yeah.
but for the most part, there really isn't any silliness in this episode. It's kind of more grounded. It felt very Doctor Who to me
Yep.
because I think even with the military setting, it's such a common place for the Doctor to land, to be like in a some sort of a war zone where soldiers are fighting with a lot of times futuristic weapons. That's not an uncommon place for the Doctor to kind
Yep.
of land. So this was like, oh, I got those Doctor Who vibes right away, and I don't know if that helps that Moffat was the one that wrote it, and he has a ton of experience writing Doctor Who. So does Russell T Davies. So I'm not saying he doesn't, but
Right.
this kind of brought it back to a different version of the Doctor, or at least Doctor Who, that I tend to enjoy more than the silly stuff.
Yeah, and it was much more contained, right? Like we don't have them running through hallways. We don't have them
Mm.
climbing ladders, getting on ships, changing scenes, going from apartment to flying ship to the spaceship, and then even all the locales that we had in the Devil's Cord. They aren't going a lot of places. That's once they land and the doctor heads out of the ship, it's there's a lot of close-ups and there's a lot of lack of movement. They stay in a singular location and everything happens there. I saw some people refer to this as like a budget conscious episode, whereas like, hey, we do have to cut scope a little bit, get a little bit more intimate in our shots and in our location. I think it feels really good throughout the entire episode, though.
Yeah. I think like the technical term for that is like a capsule episode.
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
heard
yeah,
that terminology where it is. It's like they want to keep it in a very closed type of setup where they can film most of the episode in one place maybe even not have that many actors involved. Although this is a little misleading though, because if you do look at the behind the scenes stuff, they did have a video that was like a 10-minute long kind of video that
Yeah.
they did some behind the scenes stuff on. I mean, they did some shooting like outside, they did some inside, they built an entire set for this kind of pit. They were trying to decide if they wanted to
Yeah.
go to a physical location. They ultimately decided they didn't want to chance the weather being an issue, so they built everything that you see, with them on that battlefield and going into down into that pit, and all of that stuff was all built on a set, you know. So yeah, I think when you're talking about sparing cost, it probably would have been a lot cheaper if
Right.
they had done
It's
multiple locations outside in like
right.
real places. But because even though it feels like a capsule episode, I don't know that there was a budget necessarily that
Yeah.
they were trying to hit. I think it was more the feel they were going for. They wanted it to be very like, okay, the doctor is stuck here, and we don't really need to see much else that's going on.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I think so. How we get to that point, though, right? Like you mentioned, one of the soldiers disintegrates. The other one has that interaction with the ambulance. The what we come to find out is the villain guard ambulance, important moving forward. But prior to that, the two soldiers had the discussion, right, about how there was some issues with the program. But hey, don't worry, it will probably be okay. They ran some updates. The soldier that's injured has a bandage around their eyes. The ambulance is triggered because it hears combat, which was the mine going off, disintegrating. The other soldier approaches the individual, and for a brief moment, I actually had hope that this guy was going to make it out of there in one piece, right? Because we already know he has a daughter. They did a really good job of
Mhm.
establishing that emotional weight and that emotional attachment really quickly.
Yeah, definitely. You, I kind of figured this guy had it. I mean, he was going to die. They had to have something propel the episode forward, and it's
Yeah,
not uncommon for Doctor Who to just like tragically kill, characters, especially early on to kind of set the stage. So it didn't really surprise me. I feel like we've also gotten the whole idea of someone dying, but then they're still kind of alive in a
they're still
different
there.
state. We've had lots of, I feel like that's happened a bunch actually, now that I'm thinking about one of the examples, is obviously River Song, when she
Yeah,
died,
yeah,
and she lived in this kind of, fake generated world. But there's been a lot of other ones too where somebody would die, but then you'd still hear their voice.
yeah.
Like I'm
I
thinking
mean,
of the
it,
instances, but I'm not recalling the names of the episodes. But it's not unheard of for this type of thing to happen. Yeah.
yeah. So the ambulance is we find out very quickly the ambulance does not rescue people. If you are shown to not recover within a certain period of time, they just cut costs, and by cut costs, they remove you from the equation. So that's what we hear.
That
This
sounds
guy
like
is
you're
gone.
speaking doctor propaganda right now. I don't know. As a representative of Villain Guard, that's his opinion, but
that's his
I don't
that's his
I
opinion.
don't know if there's any factual data to back up his claims. But yes, this guy was going to take 4 weeks to recover. And even like the ambulance was like, "You're blind," and he's like, "I'm not blind." Like, and she's like, "Okay, fine, you're not blind, but it's going to take you 4 weeks to
Right.
recover, so
Yep.
you're basically useless to us." But obviously communicating in a gentle, kind way, like even the probe when they shoot the probes into your arm to kind of get your
Yeah.
vitals. Like, what did she say? It's something about a scratch, like
Yeah, sharp scratch.
sharp scratch. Kind of like if you go to the doctor and they say there's gonna be a light pinch, when they give you a shot.
Yeah.
So they're trying to be kind.
Yeah.
Uh, they even let him record a message for his next of kin, and they take the time to even give him an AI version of himself that can communicate. I mean, I feel like they're not doing too bad, as a company. I'm buying
I
stock. I'm buying stock in Villain Guard.
I mean, they do have a very lucrative business model the further we get into this. I will say, like, sharp scratch is not that akin to like a little poke or a small pinch.
You're
Like
gonna feel
sharp
a pinch.
scratch sounds pretty traumatic. I wouldn't say to my kid, hey, just a heads up, we're gonna go in there and there's gonna be a sharp scratch.
They're
you'll
gonna
be
shoot
okay.
two probe spikes into your
Two
arm. You'll be
probes
fine.
directly into you.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So they do. It's effective though, like from a creepy perspective,
Oh
like
yeah.
when you're
Yeah,
kind of like
yeah.
the way that it talks and like kind of almost like this overly friendly, but also a bit monotone type of voice from an older woman, who we'll get into who the actor is that is playing that maybe later in a conversation, but yeah, so it is definitely kind of creepy, kind of like a Baymax, but like not
Right.
helping you that much. You know, it's
Yeah.
Baymax is a little bit more friendly, I guess.
It's the lack of empathy. It's the sterile communication. It's the
Mm,
very flat, knowing that no matter what this guy said, no matter what Father John Vader said,
yeah.
it wasn't going to matter one bit. He even when he calls out that he has a daughter and he is the sole person that will take care of this his daughter, it doesn't matter.
The ambulance is
That's
like, okay, record a message for her. You know, you're
yep,
done.
yeah,
You're done
yeah,
for.
exactly.
Yeah. We get all that kind of as an introduction of the episode, and then the Doctor and Ruby show up in the TARDIS. Um, Not sure why they came here. They didn't really say why, right? They just said, "Where are we?" Oh, we're in the middle of a battlefield. So
Yeah,
who knows why? Maybe the Doctor thought there was something interesting to show her. Maybe he was going to show her that cool sky of
right.
the sunset and all that, but didn't realize there was a battle going on. So he hears, I guess, the screams of John Vader
Yep,
and says, "Oh, I'm going to run toward it." So hey, we got him running toward danger now instead of running away from it. That's nice. That's
right.
an improvement, I guess. And then he steps on a mine himself, but I guess
Yep.
the way he stepped on it wasn't quite as. I guess the other guy was a little bit more clumsy and got killed right away. Whereas I guess when the Doctor kind of caught himself, didn't put like his full weight down on it. It's still trying to decide if he's the target.
Yeah.
And so he's kind of standing on one leg and was able to at least delay the explosion. Ruby finds him. He's singing,
Yep.
which I thought was interesting. All the singing part was interesting because that kind of comes up later too. But yeah, so we have the Doctor in peril, a character that we know is not going to die in episode 3 or 4, however you want to count
Right.
it. So you're not really worried that he's going to die, but maybe the consequences of, if it does go off and he survives it, but it could actually hurt other people or it could like do major damage to the planet. Is Ruby going to survive? There is some peril in this episode. It just because the Doctor is going to survive doesn't necessarily mean, you know, nobody else is in danger.
Right. Right. It is an interesting situation though to have the doctor in such recognizable peril, right? Like the doctor isn't laughing this off. They aren't making light of it. Like again, one thing that we have seen in every episode with Gatwa's doctor is that he does tend to wear his emotions on his sleeve, like visibly shaken by the fact that he's on a mine, that he has to go to great lengths to control his blood pressure, his weight, his balance, visibly crying at various points throughout the entire episode. It added again that weightiness of the episode. It raised my blood pressure just as you watch the green bars of the mine creep up, and it's like he has to start singing the song again to settle himself down. And Ruby seemed slightly disconnected by how perilous this was. I don't know if she didn't care, if she was trying to be comforting. She just kind of like approached it very level, very even, where she was approaching him, even though he was like, get the heck away from me right now.
I think when you said comforting, I think so far, even in the last episode, when the Doctor was kind of overreacting to Maestro
Yeah.
and like, oh, I can't defeat them, and and then Ruby was the one to kind of be like, oh, I think we can, maybe you can. You beat the toy maker, you like, she's trying to like give him a pep talk, and I feel like in this episode too, like if this Doctor is showing any weakness, which I think he is,
Yeah.
all the doctors have, no, none of
Yep.
them are perfect, so there's
100%.
all, and I
Yes.
think his weakness so far seems like he does get flustered. He's not always cool, calm, and collected in these situations. And whereas I could see this same type of situation happening with like let's just throw a name out there, Smith, like
Yeah.
11. We'll call him 11. Uh, if that had happened to him, I could see him being a little more calm about it, kind of joking, kind of. But it was like with 15, when he steps on the mine, suddenly he goes from that kind of fun-loving, confident guy to being like, yeah, I need to concentrate, like get away from me, or like
Yeah.
you don't know what you're talking about. He seems very irritated, even in the way he's communicating with the soldiers and stuff when they show
Yeah.
up. He's rude. It's like until he steps foot off that mine, he's kind of a different guy. He's like showing his true colors, the way that like, any of us under pressure, your true colors kind of come out. You can fake a bravado, but when you're
Yeah.
really put under pressure, that's when your true colors come out. And I feel like that was very interesting with this doctor because this episode showed it more than any other. Because later on, when he does get off, spoiler alert, he does get off the mine and he survives. When he does, he suddenly, it's like he changes to be that fun-loving guy again, with the
Yeah.
confidence and stuff. So yeah, I thought that was a interesting character study almost into this doctor of being like, yeah, he's easily rattled.
Yeah. And and I think that's one thing, one very uh high point. Man, my words are escaping me right now. I think the fact that we get that insight into the doctor, that we get so many close conversations, not only like physically close when Ruby and the doctor are nearly face to face, but the way that they're communicating, how they're communicating. I think that does make this episode fairly special in light of the ones that we've had up to this point. We get more insight into who they really are as characters. Um, Taking a step back to Ruby, you call out that in the Devil's Cord, she's the one that's encouraging the doctor, hey, you can actually do this. We get into this episode, and she's the one that's kind of disregarding what the doctor is telling her, which I think we've had companions do that
Oh yeah,
before. But
Clara, all the
yeah,
time.
there's something about this. There's something about, and maybe there's not all that much difference between Ruby and Clara. But given the mystery of Ruby, do you think that this is just like a misplaced youthful exuberance or naivety, or do you think that there's actually more to this confidence, this encouragement, this comforting that maybe even Ruby doesn't isn't aware of yet? That it's something inside of her that's slowly coming out as like, I am actually the one who the doctor thinks he's taking care of me. I'm actually the one taking care of the doctor.
You just described Clara,
No, I mean, yeah, you're not wrong.
right? Like
You're not
that,
wrong.
it's
Yes.
not
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
different of a situation because Clara had the
Yeah.
mystery behind her, and she kind of had
Yeah.
some kind of, more of, yeah, it is a very big parallel in my opinion. Um, and I do think if I was going to compare Ruby to any, even just from a personality perspective, I feel like she's mostly like Clara. There's a lot of
Yeah.
Clara, traits with her, but I do, yeah, that parallel it's almost like too close, so I hope whatever the reveal with her is something completely different and not just a, kind of, in which I'm kind of even forgetting what the details of Clara's were, but I know, she ended up becoming, um, she almost acted like she was a doctor herself,
Yeah. Yeah.
kind of by the end of it. So yeah. So that's my answer. That I think it's
That's
the same. I think it's kind of a similar situation. And I agree that there could be more to the way that Ruby's acting, that it's a subconscious thing because of some sort of internal power she has that hasn't been revealed even to her yet, where she does have this kind of maybe invincibility or like kind of like I can walk right up to this mine, even though she did seem a little scared. Like maybe there's some of this internal confidence because of, some kind of power that she has that hasn't been revealed yet.
do you think do you think that Doctor Who, the relationship, has earned this closeness in episode 4 of this season? Or do you still does it strike you as odd? Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
For
have
them
they
too,
earned, yeah, have we has the show earned that of us in the audience being like, yes, they truly are this close already, even though we're still getting to know them?
it's a little it's a little early. It works though. I don't know. They have such good chemistry
They
that
do
I feel
have
like
incredibly good chemistry.
I feel like I buy it. When later in the episode when 15 thinks that Ruby's been killed or at least like
Yeah,
wounded seriously. I mean, he's obviously very upset about it. And you believe it. I think
yeah,
because of the interactions they've had. Now they haven't been together that long, but like even you said, there was a pretty big gap in time, like a
yeah,
6 month
yeah,
gap or
yeah.
whatever. So they have traveled together, off screen. So yeah, it didn't stand out to me as an unearned thing. Now, if you ask me about like Kanto and what's her name? What was her name?
Monday,
Mundi?
Monday.
Yeah, Kanto and Mundi and their little like mini romance off to the side. I could care less about that. I was just like, I don't care about that. Why is that a side story? Didn't matter to me completely as an audience member, did not care at all about that relationship. So that was unearned. I wasn't shedding any tears for Kanto.
So let's kind of bring that into the picture at this point, right? Because we have we know that the doctor is running towards the screaming. That's how he ended up on the mine. We have the doctor balancing on the mine. We have Ruby coming out. She's responding to the doctor singing. Another musical aspect that has found its way into this
Yeah,
episode.
for
I do
sure.
think it worked well though, because the doctor is trying to calm himself. He's trying to like focus on something else, lower the blood pressure, all that other stuff. He's reciting
Mhm.
song lyrics, poetry. He's doing everything he can to bring it down. He ends up telling Ruby, "Hey, you need to find something for me to counterbalance my weight with because I need to put my foot down. I need to hold something in my hand so that the mind doesn't detect this shift in weight." Cool.
Okay. Yeah.
Ruby finds Ruby finds the dude that died, which
Like a weird flesh capsule.
yeah, that kind of threw me off. I'm not gonna
That was
lie, that was
definitely a
not my
Doctor
favorite
Who
thing.
in any other show, that'd be like, what the heck? But Doctor
Yeah.
Who, it feels like it fits kind of right into some of the weird stuff that Doctor Who does. And when she picked up that little flesh capsule, I was kind of like, okay, that's Doctor Who for you. That's
Oh
just,
yeah.
something that's a little disturbing, a little gross, but kind of funny in a way,
Yeah.
in a weird way.
Yep.
Um, Even the way she was carrying it kind of was like they were kind of making light of that. Like, ooh, I don't want to touch
Yep.
this. Yeah, super gross.
Yeah,
I think you could
really.
see his eyeball. Like
I
I was
yeah.
trying to identify different things that I was seeing, and then I'm like, I just didn't want to look at it. It was so gross.
Yep, I didn't know if it was his eye, if it was his ear hole, if it was like part of his nose. I wasn't sure, but there was definitely a orifice on the side of that container.
Yeah. Way to
Moving.
disrespect that man's body. Holy
Oh
cow.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was nasty. But we find out that Splice, his daughter, back at the camp, right? She is friends with Mundy,
Yeah.
Mundy Flynn, another soldier who just so happens to interact with Kanto, who they try to play up this whole like romantic relationship. Splice, as a what, an 11-year-old, is aware that there is some
Yeah. Some
liking
tension
going
there.
on.
Yeah.
Right. She recognizes it, but of course, Mundy and Kanto don't fess up to it. They just move forward.
Yeah.
But Mundy is supposed to be taking care of Splice, the daughter. At this point in time, though, with the doctor and Clara, oh wow,
Oh,
the
there you go.
doctor
There's
and
the slip.
Ruby, there's a
Yeah.
slip. Doctor and Ruby having like this close discussion. Ruby gonna hand him the thing to balance things out, not throw it like the doctor wanted to. They sing the song, get on rhythm. She hands it over, everything's fine. Splice shows up because she hears her father's voice.
Yeah. And we had seen the AI interaction, before she showed up, right? Didn't they
Yes.
accidentally activate? Yeah. So
Yep.
so yeah, we get her coming down and wanting to talk to her dad, kind of not putting two and two together, I guess, that he's, communicating to her through this AI, but maybe she hasn't put together that he's dead. There's also like a religious aspect to it. 'Cause she's already talked about her mother and how
Yes.
her mother was taken, I don't know what that was referring to, like that she was taken early or whatever, and almost like
Yeah.
a, taken to heaven type of situation. So she didn't seem that disturbed that her mother was gone. So it also maybe wasn't going to disturb her that her dad was gone either. She just wanted to see him and talk to him. So when they kind of didn't let her, she freaks out
Yeah.
and almost causes the mind to go off because she gets so close and kind of stressing the doctor out and all of that. So yeah,
Yeah. A very tense, high stress situation, right? Again, you see that play out very clearly on the doctor's face. You see that played
yeah,
out in his emotions, in the tone of his voice. Even Ruby, who we saw so lovingly care for the space babies, is like struggling to hold Splice back, which it seems like in this moment, an explanation would have probably served better than trying to go through introductions and I'm the doctor and who are you, and just like, I understand it's a difficult situation, but it's about to get a heck of a lot worse if this mine goes off.
right.
um
Yeah, try telling a kid, I don't know. You have kids,
yeah, yeah,
like
yeah,
sometimes kids don't pick up on the urgency of a situation and kind of what they're doing can cause a bigger problem.
yep,
They're
yeah,
very self-focused and not always aware. So it kind of fit. I think maybe she was a little old to be acting the way she was acting, but I've seen I've seen little tantrums from all ages
yeah,
of children. So um I felt like it kind of worked.
yeah. She mellows out pretty quickly though, and this is where we start to unpack some of the um religious elements of what's going on in this episode, right? Like we find out the Anglican Marines, the church, because Mundy ends up showing up. Why? Because she's looking for Splice. Splice was not supposed to leave the camp. She's wandering through a battlefield looking for her father. Mundy did a very terrible job of babysitting.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and Monday shows up and then the doctor kind of starts talking to her about the danger that is happening because she's like, you're already dead. You're stepping on this
Yeah.
mine. There's no saving you. So can you please
Give
drop?
me the death
Yeah.
capsule.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Give me the man's body back,
Yeah.
essentially. I thought it was a little overkill that she just started shooting his arm. I was just like, geez, like I feel like there maybe was a better way or like, have a little bit of a conversation. But I think maybe because there was a timer involved, she was aware that the mine, even though they were kind of counterbalancing it, eventually there's a failsafe that will go off after a certain amount of time. And so she was
Yeah.
there was some urgency there. She's like, you need to drop that capsule. So those of us that are not standing on a mine can leave because you're gonna die anyways. But then
Yes.
he kind of reveals to her, "Hey, I'm a higher dimension life form."
Yes.
Very, kind of arrogant, an arrogant way to speak to a lowly human, but basically like,
Yeah.
"Hey, you don't realize I'm a higher dimension life form, and if I blow up, it's gonna blow up half the planet and not just the surrounding area."
Yeah. I mean,
I
that
don't know if
is,
I've ever heard the doctor refer to himself as a higher dimension life form before.
yeah, I think the fact that he mentions dimension is
Yeah, what does that
is
mean?
interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
time and relative dimensions in space. I mean, we deal with dimensions all the time, but higher dimension life form. I am a
it just
complex
sounded cocky.
space-time event.
It
Yeah.
sounded
And
cocky.
Mundy follows up by saying I'm Anglican, which
Yeah, yeah,
which
right.
is I mean that carries its own weight, I
Maybe
guess,
saying
in
like
this current present context.
maybe she was saying, I have God on my side. That's
Right.
kind of her way of saying like, yeah,
I
good for you that you're a higher life form, but I have religion on my side or God or however she wanted to look
Yeah.
at it.
Or even the fact that she is the ruling power right now. She's the one with the weapon. Like she's the one with the training from her point of view.
Yeah.
Um
And her
the
shooting of the doctor's arm is kind of what alerts the ambulance to come over.
yes.
And then this is where kind of things start to unravel because now Ruby's like, oh, I'm gonna go distract. So I'm gonna over here. She picked up a gun. She starts just shooting randomly. Then Mundy's like, wait, that's maybe not gonna be enough. Why don't you shoot me in the arm?
Yeah.
Okay. So she starts to shoot Mundy, and then Cantor shows up. And come on, dude, you ruined everything. He shows up
Read the
and
room.
basically kills Ruby. Like I feel like
Yeah.
anyone that didn't have whatever interior superpowers that Ruby has that will yet to be revealed would have died from the amount of shots that he put into her. Because
Yep.
he just kind of unloaded, the laser blasts and took her out. So yeah, that was pretty intense.
Yeah. I mean it does its job though, right? Because at that point in time, the ambulance had already attached itself to the doctor,
Yeah.
had already started to make things worse, right? Because the doctor's trying to keep blood pressure low, trying to stay on top of everything, and the ambulance is about to screw things up royally.
I
But
think we're
with
down to like one light left on the mine at this point.
yeah,
Like
at
it's
this point,
there's
and
nothing left. Yeah.
and that's the thing about this episode, right? Like it starts out heavy. It amps up very quickly in regards to stakes and kind of like the intensity, the pace. The doctor will periodically slow things down, but it's just one thing after another that continues to amp up really the stress, the
Yeah.
stress level that this episode brings. Not only for those that are actually in the show, but also for the audience. I felt that like that pace, that where are we going, that continuation of the beats with every single thing that happened. Um,
That was the best part of this episode because you're on the edge
oh
of your
yeah,
seat. You know,
100%. Yep.
I mean, even like I said, we know the doctor's not going to die, and pretty much we know
Right.
Ruby's not going to die. So, but still, when they can still make you on the edge of your seat, even though you kind of logically already know that they're going to be fine, that's a
Right.
good, it's good storytelling. And I think, bravo, I think on this episode where I truly was on the edge of my seat on the first viewing. Now, I will say that rewatching it wasn't nearly as entertaining because I already kind of had already seen it and already gone through all the stress and like, okay, getting that, whatever endorphins or whatever going. But
Right.
on the second viewing, I was more like nitpicking, okay, talk dialogue or like, is the doctor kind of annoying me with some of the things he's saying or, what are the themes or what are they? That's
Yeah.
where I kind of started to dig into a little bit more. So it was a rare time where normally when I watch Doctor Who, the first time I watch it, I'm a little more critical, and then the second time I watch it, I enjoy it more. This was the opposite because of that first viewing was just so kind of intense.
Interesting. I mean, I can see that, right? Once you know how things are going to pace out, it does open you up a little bit more to take a closer look at the present scene as opposed to anticipating what comes next.
Hmm.
Um, it's it did keep that pace though, and like you said, I think that was it played to this episode's benefit. It was what made this episode feel so right, so good for vast majority of the episode.
Yeah. So some of the mystery we've been like speculating what the mystery with Ruby is,
Yeah.
and not much has been revealed. We know that snow falls sometimes with her.
Yep.
Um, and the doctor seems to be very interested in, kind of what's going on with her. Maestro made a comment about her being wrong,
Yep.
but this is the first kind of like evidence we've gotten that something's up beyond
Right.
those things, where it's like some facts. So the facts that we got when they start to scan her is, for one thing, they knew exactly who she was.
Yeah.
Ruby
Yeah. Yeah.
Sunday popped up, so it wasn't like unknown person, because she's not in their database. They knew who she was, Ruby Sunday. So that's interesting. And the age that popped up, which was like 3,082 years as
Yeah.
her age. Was that age or birth year? I think it was
That
age, right?
was that was age.
Okay.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, so now we have some facts. It didn't know who her next of kin was, so we're still got, obviously got the mystery of like who her parents are and all of that.
Yeah.
But we know she's been around for a really long time, or at least something about her has been,
Right.
and that she's been there's enough known about her that this organization has a record of her. So,
See that is an interesting thing. The one thing, so I had not thought of this until you read what year it took place. What year was it?
5,000.
5087. Okay. Bear with me for a second. I'm gonna
What are
try
you
to
look?
unpack this.
What are you looking up?
So okay,
Talk
so
me through it.
she okay, so the year is 5087.
Yep.
Okay. Grab a calculator.
Uh-oh.
Deduct 2024 from 5087. That would give us 30, 33. I mean 33 3, right? 3,300 and or 3033,
3063.
3063. Okay, how old did it say that she was? 3082.
So close.
But what year was
Oh,
she born?
I see what you're saying. So it's not a big deal.
Right, but
Huh.
so that is one thing that I like all of today I was thinking that it was saying that she was 3082 years old, which is true because of what year they are. But somehow the ambulance knew what year she was born to know how old she was on that planet at that point in time.
So if she's 19, that's your number.
That's your number.
So, okay, so you just totally demystified it for me. I don't know if others already like I'm just now catching up, but yeah, that just basically means that that's the number of years between when she was born and the year that they're actually in this episode.
So I've been latched onto that year, 3082 years, this entire time. Never once stopping and thinking, how the heck does the ambulance know who she is?
Right. That's the more, I guess, the bigger
That's
mystery. The number kind of makes it feel like, oh yeah, that's a crazy number. She's that old. But then you're like, when you just kind of demystified it, then it's like, okay, that's not that big a deal. But yeah, the fact that she's in their records now, you want to demystify that a little bit too. This is the future. So
yeah,
maybe they just have a record of all humans that have any medical records in the past,
yeah.
and so Ruby Sunday is a match to her DNA. Now, why would it think she's that old just based on
And be
her?
cool with it.
And like, well, do they just purely base it on her? How do they know what her birthday is? I guess it's in her medical records too. But they didn't
Yeah,
need to do any kind of vitals like in her DNA or blood test or age testing through it, whatever they can do to get that number. They could just look up their records. So I
right.
don't know. But yeah, I think we did just make it so it's not as interesting anymore. So I'm kind of mad about that.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry to
Because I
ruin
was
it.
all
It's
like,
just
"Oh wow, she's 3,000 years old." Or like, oh, they're sitting, and now it's like, no, that's just how
I
that's how
mean,
long it's
true.
been since her birthday.
Honestly, I've been like, oh wow, she's 3,000 years old. I even posted something on social today where it was like, on the one hand, the doctor's like, hey, you're 3,000, or we're the doctor finds out we're 3,000 years old, and his face at that point in time is like, what? But then later in the episode, he's like, your lifespans are so short, like it sucks. And it's like, you just found out that she was 3,000 flipping years old. Like, why would you say your lifespan is short? Maybe compared to yours, but now it's like,
But
okay,
now, yeah,
he understood what was going on.
yeah. So wow, that's sad.
I
So
know.
we still
I'm
don't
kind
know
of
anything.
bummed.
We really,
No,
yeah.
we
I
still
thought
don't know
I thought they
anything.
were revealing some stuff, but now, yeah, it's we still really know nothing.
I mean, other than
I don't even want to talk
she
about the
still
rest of
can
the
create
episode. That was
snow.
it. That was the only thing I want to talk about. No, the snow thing did happen again, which I think I'm hearing a lot of people saying basically anytime she's in danger is when it pops up. I don't know
Yeah,
if that's super consistent because the one time when they were just in that corridor talking, she wasn't necessarily in imminent danger there. But yeah, so who knows what triggers it. But yeah, it did start snowing, which Cantor noticed it. So it's not just the
yeah,
doctor or other like celestial beings that notice it. Like just regulars around can notice it.
yeah,
Um, but then it paused,
yeah. It stopped. It
which
froze.
was interesting too. So I don't know. Yeah, they're who knows what that's all about, but there is still some sort of mysteries going on there.
Yeah, I saw some interesting things where people pointed out that Moffat tends to include snow in a lot of episodes, references snow. I mean, four times I think over his series run, people make a big deal about it snowing. Is that enough to be like, wow, Moffat really includes snow in a lot of stuff?
Yeah.
Probably not,
Did he
but
write Twice Upon a Time?
yeah,
Oh, okay, because that has the snow literally paused in the air too. Huh.
yeah.
Okay.
That's
So
and
that's
then
it.
like another time people are like it's snowing when in actuality it was like
It was
ash
Ash. Yeah.
falling. So again, and one of our Twitter followers called it out as well. Like there are some interesting things that you can see, oh, Moffat wrote this episode or Davies wrote this episode, and now we get like this interesting mention of something very similar. No doubt, both of these both of these individuals know Doctor Who. Both of these
Hmm.
individuals have been very influential in creating stories, amazing characters within Doctor Who. I wouldn't put it past them to be dropping these cool references because they know how much a fandom loves it.
Yeah.
And it's been around for so long. Everybody loves these little tidbits that get dropped throughout episodes. So who
Yeah.
knows? Maybe Snow is a big deal to Moffat, and
Yeah.
he's just playing on it. Moffat or Davies, just playing on
Yeah.
it even more.
And they were pulling stuff out. Villain Guard is something that's been referenced or has
Yep.
been in episodes before with previous doctors.
Fish
There were
fingers and custard.
Finger and Custards was a great reference because I
Oh
don't,
heck yeah,
yeah, it's been a while since we've had a 11th Doctor, kind of
yeah,
reference. Um, we had, obviously the soldiers that have some relation to like a larger church. That's something that's happened before in Doctor Who too. So there's some really cool callbacks to stuff in this episode. They definitely got into a lot of, kind of the Doctor gets into some lecturing.
yeah. Yep.
He's talking. I mean, the messages that they're dropping on it. So this one is definitely kind of is tacking like organized religion is definitely under fire here.
Yeah. Yep.
Um, War, just in general, the kind of the industrial complex of war, profiting off of wars, the meaninglessness of wars. You don't
Yeah.
half the time you don't even really know who you're fighting against. Like all of those things were kind of commented on in one and very directly, maybe even
Right.
more in this episode than some of the indirect stuff in the previous episodes. So yeah, I mean, he definitely kind of he goes in hard on Mundy. When he's like you. I don't remember the words that he used to describe them, but I feel like he said like how dumb is that or how idiotic. I don't know, but he's being pretty harsh as far as like attacking her faith and what she believes in.
Yeah, 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 yeah. That's he does call this okay, this idiot little war. He does refer to the
Okay.
war as being idiotic. But I think what you mentioned in regards to some of the cultural touch points or talking points that were mentioned in previous episodes, they're like drive-bys or they're alluded to. This episode, and whether it is the difference between Davies and Moffat, it was pretty darn direct. Like there was no misunderstanding some of the statements of the doctor. There was no like, oh well, it was massaged a little bit. No, it was pretty darn direct. And yeah, some of it is definitely warranted. And this isn't the first time either that we've had the doctor do something similar about another topic, right? Like I feel like the doctor has gone off on capitalism before. The doctor has gone off on humans being stupid based on different structures or the way that we approach stuff. Like that's not surprising to me. This one did seem slightly different though than what we've seen the previous couple episodes, even though there were topics that were alluded to or addressed.
And he was extra harsh on a character like Mundy, who almost in some ways would be a victim of it. Like she's caught up in it.
Yeah,
She didn't necessarily do any. It's not like she's out there killing, innocent people.
yeah,
Then I
I
could see the
agree.
doctor kind of reacting a little bit differently. I don't know what her past is, but she seemed to be kind of like an innocent, you know, person caught up in this larger thing. I can
Yeah.
see him being mad about the war and about Villengard, but to kind of take it out on her. Now, some of that was probably the stress of him standing on that mine. Of course, once he got off the mine, he was way nicer to her, and he kind of even
Right.
kind of backpedaled a little bit on some of his attack on like Faith.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was just like, how dumb you sound right now, like he was
Right.
just ripping into her. I kind of felt bad for her because I mean, for someone who that's probably all she's ever known, she
Right.
grew up in that society and that's all she's ever known. He's kind of attacking her entire belief system.
Yeah.
And maybe he just thought that's the only way he could get through to her. But I thought it was a little overly mean, actually, from him. It kind of reminded me a little bit of Capaldi in how he would
Right.
act.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and I think I've said this before, but if you can take an episode of Doctor Who, remove the companion and Doctor and switch in another one and have it still work, then that's a good episode of Doctor Who.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
feel like you could have done this exact same episode with Capaldi and Clara.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, like
absolutely.
exact, like word for word almost, and just replace those two characters, and it would have worked because it's some of the personality traits that were coming through and things like that with both of the characters, I think were very Capaldi Clara-esque.
Yeah. Yep. 100%. You mentioned that that it's not like Monday. I keep on wanting to say Monday. It's not like Monday
Hmm.
was out there killing innocent people. In reality, we find out that these soldiers weren't killing
Anyone.
anyone. There was no one else that they were fighting on this planet. And that's when we get into the whole realization, the whole explanation by the doctor that Villain Guard is basically just a business that sells you weapons, that generates casualties, but never too many casualties to make you back out of the conflict. Always just enough casualties to keep you engaged and wanting to continue to fight, which is why these mines are there, which we find out, hey, these mines are actually your mines. They're not the enemy's mines. They're actually the Anglican Marines mines. Everything on this battlefield is just a grand production to keep the war profiteering moving forward. Um, of course, Mundy doesn't believe him. So
I
he
need
has to
proof.
do, he
Yeah.
needs proof. The doctor needs to prove it, which gets the whole AI flowing through
Yeah.
the ambulance, flowing through the casket, the body, the organic canister that you'd like stick into the bank machine and get it sucked up the tube. That's what that looked like. Holding that from him through the doctor into the ambulance, accessing the Villain Guard mainframe. We even got the little lightning bolts
Now that
going
we
through the
know the
doctor's
doctor
eyes.
can, like AI can travel through the doctor.
Yeah.
That's new. That's new.
Who
Um,
who needs a Sonic when the doctor's the ultimate
yeah.
interface?
Yeah, there you go. I guess we can conduct electricity, so I guess he can. Um, yeah, there was nothing that stood out to me where I was like, oh, that doesn't make sense, or that's not. I did, if there was one thing I would nitpick a little bit about would be the whole you're fighting yourselves, and they've only been there for 6 months. And like, if I was in a war and these ambulances that are supposed to be helping me are like killing all my friends because they have minor injuries, I may start to question like, okay, what's happening here? Like, why are we losing?
Right,
Like, we literally have not seen the enemy yet, and we're losing. We've lost how many people at this point? Like, I
right,
think there would be a little bit more logic involved at some point to kind of call it out or be like, hey, we're not going to buy weapons from this this company anymore
right.
because they're just killing us. But maybe, I mean, that's the only thing I would nitpick a little bit that
I
there
mean,
was a little bit of a leap in my brain
yeah.
to kind of believe that that could ever happen. But yeah, I don't know.
I mean, that sets up the doctor's argument, right? Like whether or not that would be possible or that could happen or that no one ever questioned it, that kind of plays to the doctor's favor, right? Because he's like, anybody else would have realized this. How is it taking you so long to figure out
Yeah.
that like this is what's happening?
Yeah, because there's like a fate
They're not in
element.
the mud, they're not in the fog.
Yeah,
Like you've analyzed all of that.
there's like a faith
Um,
element involved, which
right,
is easy to kind of pick on, where it's just like, oh, well, if you're just saying it's faith, then it's kind of ignorant.
right.
If there's
We
not, yeah,
we don't need to get into a philosophical or theological explanation of the true reality of faith in this podcast, but that is, I mean, that is ultimately what the doctor brings his argument to bear against,
yeah,
is that idea, that understanding of blind faith, just accepting no matter what, just moving forward because that's what you do. And that is where the crux of his argument is. Ultimately, though, the doctor is proven right. Villain Guard is the villain, surprise, surprise, of this episode. Um, that's Father John, John Francis Vader.
What would be interesting though, because there is definitely kind of a commentary happening in this episode that's kind of anti-faith, right?
Yeah,
You know, pe people out there have their beliefs, religions. There's tons of people that would say they have faith, they believe in God, whatever. But this episode is kind of talking against that. But at the same time, it's also trying to have implemented into the story of Doctor Who, which is kind of a new thing, the idea of gods.
yeah,
So even the doctor's kind of belief that faith is kind of ignorant, because there are no gods. Well, now we're kind of revealing there are. So, it would be interesting to see maybe some of this stuff coming back later on where he's kind of mocking it in this faith idea, or like the fact that there's this church, but then only to find out that that church was established because of these gods that he's either fighting or partnering with later in this, series, or finds out that Ruby is one. Who knows where it goes? But,
That's
like that suddenly he'll be like, oh, wait, actually, they weren't so ignorant because they were worshiping actual gods that actually exist, that in the Doctor Who world, So
right.
I don't know. It could,
It's
I don't know if Moffat's getting that, kind of thread with it, but it would be
yeah.
interesting if it kind of came back as a talking point later.
I mean, we mentioned it last episode, right? Like you have some very interesting similarities when it comes to a Christmas story, with the oldest one and with Ruby being born on Christmas and no one really knowing where she came from, the mother that dropped her off. That's there's there's a lot of interesting elements in here that Moffat is teasing out. And honestly, at this point, with everything else that we're getting, I wouldn't be surprised wherever this story might end up. I wouldn't be surprised if some of these elements are just dropped. I wouldn't be surprised if
Yeah.
some of these elements carry a heck of a lot of weight moving forward. I think that's the one interesting thing is that Davies and Moffat really are putting a ton of things on the table right now. And like,
It's given
who
us a lot to
knows?
talk about.
Right. Who knows what this is going to turn into? There's a lot of stuff on the table, and not everything needs to end up coming to fruition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, what was I gonna say? Oh, if we find out that Ruby's mom's name is Mary, then that'll
uh, I mean, we'll see, we'll see, or Madonna. I mean, they're gonna throw some other reference in there at some point with go with a classical name of Mary,
find
but
out her mother's name is Mary, and her mother's from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania.
right,
Then they'll just keep dropping these like Christmas references,
just keep taking it.
hitting us over the head
Um,
with it.
yeah. So John Vader, right? Like the AI, daddies do what daddies do. Dad to dad, like go do your business, protect your daughter, all this other stuff. Even though he's AI, there's still bits and pieces of the real John Vader in there somewhere. So he goes wreaks havoc on Villain Guard, right? He takes down the mainframe, discovers everything, makes sure everything's all good. Honestly, this is where I get a little sketchy exactly what he did, but he ends up winning. And I think
Yeah,
that's all that matters.
I think he took down the whole. It's like he took down the whole thing. This
Yeah,
whole like military industrial complex that's been the only supplier of this stuff for, I think how long did he say? 2 century, or I forget what he said,
a
something like that.
long time.
Um, in this sector. So they've basically been running the game for quite a while. And it sounds like this AI guy basically initially they thought they had deleted him. That's what the
Yeah.
ambulances were saying, that they had deleted him, but he actually found his way through the firewall and took the whole thing down. Like so, in some ways, you could say the Doctor was not the hero in this episode at all, other than the fact that he's the one that motivated the AI. But
Yes.
he didn't really do it. It was more this guy that kind of went in and saved the day. He's the reason Ruby still survived because he was able
Yep.
to basically override the ambulance, which would then heal her. He didn't do it in time to save Mr. Cantor. Sorry, buddy, but
Yeah.
he finally got the girl and then died. As soon as she like admitted, she's like, "Oh, I like you too." Dead. Oh, poor guy.
And it's a force ghost.
Yeah, so did not have any feelings at all about that. Like once again, I'll say that was kind of a wasted. I'm not sure why they tried to throw in the little romantic element in that story, but yeah. So yeah, they kind of take him down, and then yeah, that's kind of the end, right? The Doctor does kind of backpedal on the faith thing because they talk about how um I don't know. I don't remember the quotes. You have the script. What do they say at the end there about sometimes you do need faith?
Yeah, he makes a comment to Mundy, and Mundy's like, I thought you hated faith.
Yeah.
And or I thought you were against faith. And he says something along the lines of, I might hate faith, but we all need it. sometimes, but even I need it sometimes.
Oh, he
Um,
tells Splice he tells her to keep the faith.
yeah, keep the faith.
The doctor says keep the faith, and then that's when Mundy kind of questions him, and then he says, just because I don't like it doesn't mean I don't need it.
Right. Yes,
Which to
yes,
me,
yes.
even after the first viewing, I was like, you are not allowed to say that. Because he was like going
Yeah.
so hard on it and how dumb how dumb do you sound and how idiotic and all this stuff and really just ripping in on that on their faith. And then at the end, oh well, sometimes I even need it. Like, no, you cannot. You can't backpedal on that. So I kind of was a little annoyed with that line at the end. I thought you can't have it both ways. I'm sorry. You can't have it both
Yeah.
ways.
It didn't strike me as a terrible line. I thought it was somewhat of an olive branch. I also thought it was a doctor um patting a little girl on the head, helping her to move forward in whatever way the little girl needs to move forward. I mean, she lost her mom. Her mom got gathered up.
Whatever
And
that means.
now
Yeah.
her dad's not gone. Her dad's just dead.
He's just a
Um
hologram now.
he's
Yeah.
just a hologram now. Yeah, it's the way that the episode ends, right? And this is where I think I forget whether this actually made it into the last episode that we talked about or not. The fourth wall, right? Like the
Yeah.
doctor and Ruby head back to the TARDIS. And the doctor doesn't necessarily do the whole like eye contact with camera and like wink so you know he's breaking the fourth wall, but just because of the way that they are in the TARDIS looking out and the camera is like directly positioned in front of them, it feels like the doctor's breaking the fourth wall with some of the things that he says in regards to um in the line, let's
What
see.
survives of us is love.
Yes, thank you. Yes, just it feels like again we
And
have this in moment at the TARDIS speaking to the audience, and he drops like a weighty statement, a moral of the story, or something like that for all of us to carry on with us.
yeah, which apparently is a reference to, I looked this up because he said some old man told me, and
Yeah,
apparently there was like that's a line from something. So there is a person that said that, but I don't know. I can't find it now. But it was a reference to something that actually a real person, I don't know if it was a poet or an author or somebody said that. Um,
yes, and our Arundel Tomb by Philip Larkin.
okay, there you go. Philip Larkin was the man that he talked to, I guess, that
Yes,
told him
I
that.
guess so.
So it's a good line, but once again, I feel like some of it is a little have it both ways. If you're going to be super, everything's based in science and there is no faith and you're an idiot if you believe in these things, but then at the end, it's like, oh, everybody needs a little faith and like what survives of us is love. Like that feels very, you know,
Moffity. It feels very Moffity, right?
true.
Like all we need to do is say the happy words at the end of the episode, and like everything's made better. Um,
Yeah.
that's
There's a fine line between supernatural and religion because
yeah,
religion is based on believing in the supernatural. And so that's why, the doctor is kind of a more science-based, kind of character in general. But yeah, they have been skirting the line lately of that not being the case. So, this maybe it's just a recurring theme now. We're going to have more kind of supernatural elements and testing even what the doctor believes in.
yeah.
Uh,
It's it will be interesting to see where this goes. Where the show goes, right? I think there was an article written. I know there was an article written. I didn't have a chance to dig all that deeply into it, but just the fact that Davies is mixing in more fantasy elements into Doctor Who moving forward. And I feel like that's kind of what we're talking about with the Pantheon getting mixed in and some of these things that are no longer science based, right? Tennant's battle with the Toymaker, it wasn't logic and science and predictability. Even when we get to Gatwa's first episode, right? Like it's coincidence. That's not science. It just
yeah,
it just kind of
everything's
happens. Like
connected. Yeah. Yeah.
right, like we have these things that are less science based, less logic based, less reason based, and they are now just coincidence and outside of the realm of predictability and science, and it's chaos. And there's now this new fantasy element mixed into it.
Makes for it makes for more fun speculation because there's more possibilities, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Anything can happen.
so I'm tired, but there's still a couple things we have to talk about.
Bring it.
Um, so Mundy Flynn, kind of a surprise appearance for anyone that's been paying attention. They've already, we didn't get to talk about this. We probably should have recorded an episode to talk about this stuff, but we didn't
Yeah.
before the season hit. But there was already this drama about the fact that Millie Gibson was going to be leaving the show after one
Yep.
season, and she was going to be a one season companion. They've already announced her replacement. It's this girl, Virata Sethu, who is known for being in the show Andor, which I thought she was great in that show. Um, so there was kind of all this news about, oh, she's already being replaced. Well, then Doctor Who kind of makes it right and says, no, she's not being replaced. We're just adding another companion. So now they've already done like photo shoot with the three of them together. It's already this big announcement that she's coming next season.
Right.
Well, then we get this episode pops up, and lo and behold, who is it? It's the future companion, like showing up in this episode. Um, it took me a second because I'm like, is that this? Is it her? Like, I'm like, her hair's cut really short, a lot different than she normally looks like in other things I've seen her in. But yeah, it's definitely her. And so it's interesting because I don't think there was an expectation that we would have seen her this soon.
Yeah.
Obviously, she didn't jump on the TARDIS with the doctor, at the end of this. He did say, I'm going to come back and visit, or I'm going to
Yeah.
check in on you. So maybe that's setting up, he comes back, they interact again, and then she comes onto the TARDIS. So I was really surprised that she showed up at all. Um, there is some precedence for actors showing up and then having a pretty big gap and then becoming the companion. So maybe they're just kind of sticking to that story beat, the way that, kind of repeating things that have happened in the past.
Yeah. I'm curious to know, right? Like you've mentioned it can go two ways. Same actress, different character, or same actress, same character.
Hmm.
Would this be the first companion that we have in Doctor or in New Who, if this is still New Who, where it's not a present day companion, it's a
Oh, from the
future
future.
future space companion? Like
Depends on who
that
you
would
count as companions.
okay.
Because
Nardole.
Nardole would definitely fall in the realm of not a current from our time companion, but I wouldn't count him.
I was
I'm,
gonna say I
I'm
don't
kind of
think he
strict
even
on who I
counted
count.
himself as a companion.
I don't even count
You
Rory as a companion. So
okay.
I'm pretty
Okay.
specific about, there's a main companion and there's the side people. Now there have been more than one main companion. I think like, famously with Jodie Whittaker's run, she had her,
Yes.
three companions that were all together.
They weren't
Um,
companions.
friends, whatever.
Friends.
But I think that there are times where there's some that are equal, but there's usually, someone where there's the main one, there's the Rose, and then there's the
Yeah.
Mickey, and Mickey
Yeah.
is not a, he doesn't count, in my opinion, when you're
Yeah.
going down the list of main companions. So I would,
There's
Nardole does kind of skirt the line though, because he does kind of toward the end become more of a main companion, but I would still
I'm trying
consider
to
him
I'm trying to
side.
remember what they referred to him as a valet, right? They referred to him more as the doctor's valet, not companion. He was there to take care of the doctor.
He
Um
definitely had a moment like when, anytime the doctor is like regenerating and there's like they kind of have their moment, with, past companions. And Nardole was there when Capaldi was doing his little walk. So, you know, I guess that one's debatable. But yeah, I guess to answer your question, if you count Nardole, then no, this wouldn't be the first time that we've had a companion from a different time period in the future.
okay. Interesting. Yeah, so
So,
that I mean that in and
so
of
what are
itself would be intriguing.
if we go down the list, Rose, obviously from the normal time, Martha, normal time, Donna, normal time. Who's next?
Clara.
Clara? Clara.
Yeah.
Now, Clara, once again, a little debatable because she kind of, when she first showed up, she was from the past, but then we find out she's got all kinds of like timey-wimey stuff going on. So I don't know where you kind of count her as
Yeah.
far as like her actual time.
We were going in order. Did you already say Amy? Sorry.
Amy, no, I didn't say Amy.
Okay, so
So
Amy, then Clara.
yeah, Amy's normal. And then we go Bill,
Bill.
normal, and does it go from Bill to just the three?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then now, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah. So all
Hmm.
normal people from normal time periods. Other than Claire is the maybe outlier just because got a little bit of a weirder backstory. But yeah. But she's
Yeah.
human. She could easily fit into, you bring her to 2024, she's not standing out. Like it's not like he's bringing on some sort of a very futuristic like cyborg
Right.
alien or something like. So I don't think it's that big a deal, as far as a her fitting in, even cultural wise. If he brought her from like the 1500s, there would be like a weird kind of cultural thing going on. But with her, they seem to act just like normal.
Yeah. She would just be less amazed
She
by
would have that
everything.
little like cool communicator in the side of her
She
face, maybe that
touch her cheek and talk.
will take advantage. So, what do
Yeah.
you think? Like, what's your guess? Do you think it's going to be him just coming back and it's the same character, or it's just the same actor playing a different character?
I think it's going to be the same character.
Yeah.
I feel like just the exchange that we've seen just in this episode alone between the Doctor and Mundy, I would not be surprised, right? If next season it's like she has abandoned the faith, the church. She has like left it. She's now agnostic or whatever, however we want to frame it. I would not be surprised if that's the direction they go with her, and the Doctor sweeps her up, and she travels with them moving forward. I don't know what happens with Splice. Again, maybe Mundy is like the worst babysitter or caretaker
Oh,
ever,
that's true. Because
and
if she
she just leaves
leaves,
Splice by herself. But
yeah.
um,
Yeah, I kind of agree. I do agree with you that that's the most likely scenario, that it's just the same. But I do wonder because we have had um, even multiple companions, Martha and Amy, examples of they played a character in an
yeah,
episode, then later on were cast as the companion as a completely different character. I do kind of wonder if maybe in this filming of this episode, they liked her so much. They already had plans to bring in a companion, but they just liked that actor so much that they're like, hey, we're going to write, a part for you to come in as a companion later, but you're going to be a completely different character. Um, so I kind of like that idea better than it just being this girl, but what you think is more likely, I think.
I lazy writing potentially. No, I don't know. It's I do think it probably is the more likely, and I would be fine with it. I
Yeah.
think there are some redeemable qualities about Monday. I think it would be fun to see, especially if she does take more of a straight-laced approach.
Yes.
Her dynamic with the exuberant Doctor and Ruby would
She
be
could calm
interesting to
them
see
down.
play out.
She could be like,
Right,
guys, we don't need to squeal at everything.
right.
That she could
Or
be the the one to kind of
yeah,
balance that a little bit.
right. Or it would just be her constantly annoyed at how excitable they are about everything. And she would just be like,
She just rolls her eyes. Yeah.
yeah, she just rolls her eyes.
Yeah.
There's an interesting dynamic there.
Yeah. So we'll figure, I mean, more will be revealed. Are we halfway through? Like almost, I guess, which is kind of crazy if there's 8 episodes. I mean, I'm sure there will be another special and, all of that. But yeah, we're blazing through this season. The last
Yeah.
thing that I was just going to bring up because we did say we were going to talk about this in our last episode is Susan Twist. The, I think we said a lot in the last episode, so we probably don't have to go too much into it. But obviously, we have this character played by Susan Twist,
Yep.
who is, excuse me, um, popping up in weird places, playing a lot of different characters. What does that mean? There's a lot of speculation around her. Yeah, I don't necessarily have any thoughts. I'm just kind of waiting for them to kind of reveal more about it, but I don't necessarily have any kind of crazy theories either.
Yeah, I think I mean Susan Twist was the ambulance this go around, right?
Yeah.
It's I don't think there's even enough there to be like, oh, she's clearly an evil character. It's like, yeah, I don't know. Like, is she the villain that's waiting at the end? I don't think there's enough to say that she's the villain. As the tea lady, their interaction, it was pretty mundane, right? Like there wasn't anything about that. Maybe she did make a comment as the tea lady
She made a
that
comment
she was
about
evil.
like a movie reference or something that like, the type of woman that I don't know. There was definitely a comment made in
That's
that
me,
episode.
Margaret Lockwood, in The Wicked Lady. Now there was a woman statuesque. That's what
Yeah.
she said.
That's definitely a hint. Has to be. You don't
Is
make
it?
that kind of comment that specific unless there's some kind of hidden meaning there. Um, yeah, there's going to be something. There's going to be something that we'll look back and be like, oh, we should have seen it, right? Or she
Yeah,
will
yeah,
be
yeah.
revealed when they get to the Pantheon. More of these Pantheon characters are revealed. We already know that, what is it? The old one? The what?
The oldest one?
The oldest one. The oldest one and the one who waits, right? Those are the two that have already been kind of proclaimed that we don't
Yeah,
know who they are. So she could be the oldest one. And she's
yeah.
just kind of watching. She's just kind of kind of watching what's happening and seeing, from her perspective. Or she could be the one who waits and like is waiting to reveal herself and she is evil. There's gonna be something that this has been planted and it's too intentional for it just to be like a Ratzenberger shows up at every Pixar movie type of thing. Like I think there's more to it than just a cameo, a fun little tongue-in-cheek cameo.
That's yeah. I think the fact that she's the ambulance is such a weird thing, right? Because it's not like in other instances she's like a background character, has no huge impact. As an ambulance, she's not really there. She like is, but she's
It's a
not really a
digital
character in of
creation,
itself.
right? Like,
Yeah.
so maybe they're just basing the image on something.
Yeah.
I mean, there
I
is a religious connection, so maybe that's like kind of like how we see images of Mary. It could be
did
like they imitated the look of a deity, or
there you go. It's she is Mary.
there you go,
She is Ruby's mom. She is the one that dropped it off at the church. We're
there you go.
tying it all
She's
together.
the,
We're
and
tying it all together.
and she's the oldest one.
She's the
So
oldest one.
so Mary or so Ruby is the child of a god. So she's a demigod. There you go. Right? That's what we'll find out. We already figured it all out. We don't even need to watch the rest.
We can move on.
But no, I guess overall, like thoughts on this episode. Like I said, I liked it more the first time because I was on the edge of my seat. The second time I was a little bit more nitpicky about some of the there are definitely some elements of this version of the Doctor that I'm finding kind of annoying. I was actually thinking about that
I
recently. Like, where does he fall? Like, I know it's so early to make a call on like where does he fall on like if I was listing my favorite Doctors. There are things I like about him, for sure. But right now, he probably wouldn't rank above any of the modern Doctors for me. He still hasn't established himself enough or had any kind of moments where I kind of can be like, oh wow, yeah, that's the Doctor. He's still kind of finding his footing, showing his cracks. Like this episode, definitely, I was kind of like, man, dude, you're kind of a jerk. Like there were definitely some parts where I was just like not loving him. So I'm rooting for him. I'm hoping that, we get some more, we pull back some more layers with this version of the Doctor, and there are more things that I like about him. But so far, um, I've enjoyed him as the Doctor, but he's definitely not. He doesn't rank above any of the modern Doctors for me. He falls at the very bottom.
it's so interesting just because I feel like I mean I remember having similar conversation about Capaldi, about
Mhm.
Whitaker, about Gatwa. Like there's something about these doctors that in the flow of their stories, in the flow of their episodes, I do struggle to be like, oh yeah, this one I can fall in line with. This one I feel comfortable with. I don't know if it was just the format in which I watched Eccleston, Tennant, and even some of Smith, where it was just like I could sit down and binge the episodes because they had already been out. So I didn't really have time to stop and think, is this the Doctor? Do I like this character? Because it was just one after another, after another, after another until it was like, oh, this is who they are. It's something interesting though that with Eccleston or with Capaldi, with Whitaker, with Gatwa, I do feel like we have these episodes where it's like that kind of rubs me. Like, is that really how you're going to respond here? Are you really going to run away in this instance? Are you really going to snap at this point in time? Like, are you really going to be that blunt and just jerkish in these moments? Um, yeah, it's curious. I'm interested to see, and I know you are too. This is not, you're not passing judgment on Gatwa. I am interested to see, or Gatwa's doctor. I am
15.
interested to see
15.
15. There we go. We aren't passing
We're gonna
judgment on
try. I'm gonna
15.
start trying to call him 15 more. I feel like he deserves it. He deserves the title.
I am interested to see where this turns up. Like the one thing we went back to or came back to time and time again with Whitaker is we never got a solid monologue. Like one of those statement monologues that made you think, dang, you are the doctor, you have gravitas, you can control the room. This is yours. What we're seeing out of uh the fifth what we're seeing out of 15 right now is he not self-assured enough to have one of those monologues? Does he
Right.
doubt himself too much to be able to have one of these monologues? Maybe he'll find himself.
He only
Back to
shows
this.
confidence against goblins. Like it's
I mean, that is interesting, right? Like
he was
because
very confident against the goblins.
very
Uh,
confident against the goblins.
and I would even venture to say in that first episode, the Christmas special, very doctor-like,
Yeah,
in like the elements I like about the doctor were reflected in that the way he was portraying the doctor in that first episode. Um, I don't know what changed in direction or story or whatever that I don't feel like I'm getting that as much with these last few. Maybe it is because he's just coming up against things that are harder for him to deal with. So, we're seeing a stressed version of the doctor, and maybe he'll,
yeah,
kind of gain that confidence as he goes on. I hope he gets his big moment. I agree. I don't think Whitaker ever did.
yeah,
I did really like her in her run, in the way she portrayed the doctor, but I do think there are some touch points that never happened with her that even
yeah,
Capaldi got. I thought Capaldi by the end did get his moments. By the end, I did feel like had earned that kind of, yeah, he's definitely, one he in my mind kind of sits along the others as being a very good doctor. Um, so yeah, I hope Gatwa, I hope they write some stories for him that he can kind of get there too. But right now, yeah, I would definitely say he's after 4 episodes, 4.5 if you count his appearance in the Giggle, he's still kind of working. And we know we're gonna get him for at least 2 seasons, right? Like we know
yeah.
they're already filming the
Yep.
next season. So we'll have time. We'll have time to get to know him better and probably fall in love with him even more. But for now, I'm still a little kind of like, all right, I don't know. He's not quite my doctor yet.
One thing, and then I'm going to jump to what I thought of this episode. It's interesting that you call out the church on Roby Road and how different that version of the doctor is compared to what we've seen with Space Babies Forward. There
Mhm.
was a sense of like wonder. There was a sense of like fascination with the science of ropes and coincidence, and he just seemed fascinated by anything and everything that he came across, no matter how dire the situation was. He was engaged with it. He was just like in awe of everything. And there was something, that childlike wonder, that those fresh eyes, that new doctor. There was something about that was intriguing, that was different, that was fresh. I don't think that's the same doctor that we have in The Devil's Cord and in Boom. It seems like a different doctor. Okay, episode. I really like this one. I
Mhm.
feel like this is the first episode in a while that it was like, oh, this is familiar. This is Doctor Who. Like this is something about the pacing, the dialogue, the writing, the situation, even in some of those very blunt interactions of the doctor.
Mhm.
Like I could see some of the previous doctors having similar interactions, maybe not to that extent, but similar. Um, and then a nice little tidy bow at the end of it, right? Issues resolved, big business dismantled, and they can move on, and he's going to check in periodically. I enjoyed it. It felt very familiar. I think it's probably the strongest of the three slash four that we've seen so far, I think this is probably a high point in the season.
Yeah, I think I agree for the most part with that. I think I think maybe in some ways the Devil's Cord rivals it. If I had to say, oh, my favorite episode so far, these two would be close, because there were some stuff I really liked about that one too. But yeah, the writing, the familiarity of Moffat's writing, like as I'm watching it, even just the scene where he's like, throw the thing to your hand, like throw it up and
Yeah,
catch it, and then the doctor knew exactly how much it weighed
yeah,
based on just seeing the way she caught it, and then he's like, oh, I didn't want to show off, like he knew the exact weight. I was like, that's such a Moffat way of writing the Doctor. He's
yeah,
always written the Doctor as kind of like a Sherlock Holmes type of
yeah.
genius. And I thought that was kind of interesting because like I recognized it right away. I was like, that is a Moffatism. Like that scene right there, that's Moffat writing the Doctor, and it was very recognizable. So yeah, it was nice to have him back. I'm sure we criticized stuff that he wrote,
Oh,
in all of
always.
our reviews for sure, but you know, he knows the Doctor and he knows how to write
Yep.
the Doctor, and I'm excited that he's doing more. I'm glad that it's
Yeah.
not just a one-off, like he's coming back to write more too.
Well, I'm pretty sure that was exactly what we've said in past episodes is that Moffat, when he's given a single episode, dang, his episodes sing. When he's given a storyline or he's responsible for writing a storyline, threads get lost.
He gets
Like there's
lost in
stuff
his
that
own, yeah, he
yep,
gets lost in
there's
his
stuff that
own
doesn't
stuff.
add up. Dialogue is incredible. Different mannerisms, different things that he adds in are great, but stories get lost along the way. So, hey, we get this one. We get the 2024 Christmas special, Joy to the World. That's a Moffat episode. I think that's going to be fun to watch as well.
And because they're talking so much about Christmas and snow, and this episode, final scene, snowflake. Like a big
Snowflake.
snowflake comes to the screen. So like it's definitely a focus that I do think that the next Christmas special is going to be a big deal because of how
Yeah.
much they're continuing to tie things into Christmas. So that'll be fun for sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
Absolutely.
Well, we're officially caught up for now, but until Friday,
I was going to say
which is,
until 2 days.
yeah, and then we'll be behind again. But it's coming fast and furious, and yeah, it gives us an excuse to podcast, which is always fun. So
Yep. We'll keep up.
we will wrap that up for now, and until next time,
I don't have anything. Give me a second.
no
Dang.
quotes. You didn't have a quote
No.
ready?
I went back and forth through so many transcripts this go round. I don't have a quote ready. Give me a second. There's one right
You could have just said like keep the
there.
faith.
Oh
Until next
my.
time, keep the
Keep
faith.
the faith.
That's good. That's good. We'll leave it at
We'll
that.
take it. We'll take it.